Hello everyone and thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Let's get into it. British Foreign Minister James Cleverly has been praising the resilience of Ukrainians as he met his counterpart Dmytro Kuleba on a visit to Kyiv. In a video released online, Mr. Kuleba is seen showing Mr. Cleverly images on his mobile phone of Kyiv plunged into darkness as a result of Russian airstrikes on Ukrainian infrastructure that have caused power cuts across the country. During a news conference later, Cleverly said he believes Ukrainians will continue with the steadfast defense of their homeland. Cleverly has become the second person in the new UK administration to visit Kyiv. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made his first visit on Saturday and vowed to continue the firm support for Ukraine that Britain provided under his predecessors.
Bank where people mostly live.
Thank you for welcoming me here to Kyiv and to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where I've been able to have a good conversation with my colleague, but someone who I increasingly think of now. I saw the strength and the resilience and the perseverance of the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian government. And I am left with no doubt that the Ukrainians will continue with their steadfast defense of their homeland against this unprovoked aggression.
Well, Cleverly also announced millions of pounds in additional support for Ukraine and later met with President Volodymyr Zelensky. The president's office posted a video of him shaking hands with Cleverly, saying, "Nice to meet you, Minister. You're welcome. Thank you, Britain, for its support." According to Mr. Cleverly, Britain stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainians and announced a package of support for Ukraine, ranging from ambulances to support for survivors of the sexual violence carried out by the Russian military.
We are really thankful for and all our appreciation for all support of all the society, government from Britain to Ukraine. Thank you so much. It's really, we are really friends. What is more important that our society know it and never forget. Yes, we had good meeting, very good meeting, raised by Prime Minister. He is deeply in very much and really, in Britain, in London, she will be at the end of this.
More support from friends of Ukraine. The U.S. government has delivered as many as 22,500 high thermal blankets to Ukrainians to be used at the heating points that are being arranged for passengers and other war-affected people at almost 100 railway stations across the country. The aid provided by the U.S. Agency for International Development, Bureau for Humanitarian Assistance, as part of a project implemented by the International Organization for Migration, was to help Ukrainians as temperatures plummet and the humanitarian needs in Ukraine grow. Chairman of the Board of Ukrainian Air Railways, Alexander Lamyshin, said he was grateful to the U.S. government and her people for supporting Ukraine and promised to deliver the blankets to the fortresses of invincibility, which are located at the railway stations of the country. Well, U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, acknowledged the impact and damage caused by latest attacks on Ukraine and said the blankets are just one way the U.S. is helping Ukrainians get through the winter. She said the goal, however, is to help Ukraine protect its critical infrastructure so no one needs to leave home to find warmth elsewhere.
This latest cruel attack just 2 days ago that killed many people, injured many others, in an attempt to put Ukraine into the cold and dark, only makes Ukrainians and us more determined to work around the clock to prepare for winter. Ukrzaliznytsia has been a symbol to us and to the world of real heroism.
And in response to continuous missile attacks from Russia, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says the decision whether to send Patriot air defense units to Ukraine lies with the specific nations. He made the comment when asked about Polish demands for Germany to pass on Patriot units to Ukraine. Berlin offered Warsaw the Patriot system to help secure its airspace after a stray missile crashed and killed 2 people in Poland last week. But Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak later asked Germany to send the fire units to Ukraine instead. However, Mr. Stoltenberg spoke of a national decision.
We have also provided significant air defense systems to Ukraine, including with modern systems. Germany has provided modern air defense systems to Ukraine, and I will, at the foreign ministerial meeting next week, urge allies to further step up the support, not least with air defense to Ukraine. But specific decisions on specific capabilities, that remains national decisions. What we have seen over now several months are horrific attacks against civilians, residential areas, critical civilian infrastructure, and also against schools and hospitals, with a high number of civilian casualties. Intentional targeting of civilian infrastructure and civilians is a war crime. And therefore it is so extremely important that investigations are conducted, that all the facts are established. I'm confident that all allies will ratify. I will not speculate about exactly when, but the sooner the better, because we know that Finnish and Swedish membership will strengthen NATO, it will strengthen transatlantic security. They are partners of NATO for many years, and they have significant capabilities that will help to strengthen the whole alliance.
Back inside Ukraine, Deputy Head of the Office of the President, Kyrylo Tymoshenko, says the power supply is gradually being restored in all regions of the country, with power to critical infrastructure connected first, followed by domestic power connections. Ukraine's main energy company also said that most of the country's hydroelectric and thermal power plants have resumed operations. Nuclear power plants in Ukraine, except Zaporizhzhia, that's the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plants, are gradually coming back online to provide power to the country. But by Thursday evening, Ukrainian energy suppliers said they were able to meet about half of the country's electricity needs, according to reports. On the other side of the war, the Russian Defense Ministry has released footage said to be of newly released Russian prisoners of war leaving a Moscow airport after the latest prisoner swap with Ukraine. A man landed at the Chikalovsky airport in Moscow region. Denis Pushilin, the Moscow-backed head of the part of Ukraine's Donetsk region that is under Russian control, said earlier that a prisoner swap with Kyiv was taking place involving 50 prisoners on each side. Kyiv and Moscow have so far swapped over 1,000 prisoners of war since the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine in February. And the European Union will be pressing on ahead with a 9th sanctions package on Russia in response to Moscow's attack on Ukraine. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said this during a visit to Finland. However, Ms. von der Leyen did not provide details of what measures a new round of EU sanctions could contain. The EU last month gave a final approval to its 8th batch of sanctions over the invasion, including more restrictions on trade in steel and technology products. At a joint press conference with the Prime Ministers of Finland and Estonia, and the Deputy Prime Minister of Sweden, von der Leyen, said Russia's attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure amounted to war crimes.
Hard to hit Russia where it hurts, to blunt even further its capacity to wage war on Ukraine. And I can announce today that we are working full speed on a 9th sanctions package. And I'm confident that we will very soon approve a global price cap on Russian oil with the G7 and other major partners. We will not rest until Ukraine has prevailed over Putin and his unlawful and barbaric war. The Ukrainian people, because of Putin's barbaric terroristic attack on the country's civil infrastructure, must face this oncoming winter with no electricity and in many places no running water. Because of him, babies, their parents and grandparents are freezing in the dark. And I strongly condemn these barbaric attacks. They are war crimes. But I also know that our Ukrainian friends will overcome this tragedy because they are strong and their cause is just. And we, the European Union, stand here by them in these very difficult times as long as it takes.
U.S. President Joe Biden says the price caps on Russian oil being proposed under the Group of Seven Nations scheme is in play, adding that he had spoken to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on the issue. President Biden was informing reporters during a Thanksgiving holiday visit to a fire station in Nantucket Island. European Union governments are set to resume talks today or over the weekend after failing to reach a deal on Wednesday on the level to cap prices for Russian seaborne oil. The Biden administration sees the price cap as a way to cut oil revenues for Russia, a major source of its funding for its war against Ukraine, while keeping Russian oil flowing and avoiding price hikes. President Biden mentioned the latest presidential drawdown valued at up to $400 million intended as aid to Ukraine's defense needs.
Well, yes. Matter of fact, I just had another drawdown. I signed another drawdown of over $300 million. And there's no time. This is no time to walk away from Ukraine. Not at all. Now, we had a lot of talk in this last election about whether the other team is going to continue to support Ukraine. I still believe there's enough support there.
Meanwhile, the row among EU member states continue over how to tackle Europe's energy crisis. Energy ministers have been meeting to discuss the most controversial measure, which is an EU-wide cap on gas prices. With all of this going on, how are Germans coping after the weather took a turn for the much colder this week, with energy bills at record highs? The Deutsche Welle's correspondent, Rob Watts, is in Berlin for us. Rob, thank you for joining us on the program. The EU has been locked in a bitter dispute between members over how best to cope with the bloc's energy crisis. Are they any closer to resolution?
Well, once again this week, the differences between EU member states was laid bare as energy ministers held that meeting in Brussels. The focal point of their disagreement is a plan to introduce a block-wide cap on wholesale gas prices, because gas has become so expensive in Europe since Russia started choking off supplies following its invasion of Ukraine. Now, the aim of a cap would be to use the EU's combined buying power to force down prices and so make energy less costly. And on one side, you have the likes of France, Spain, Belgium, Greece, who want a cap introduced without delay to help citizens with their soaring energy bills. But then, on the other side, you've got the EU's biggest economy, Germany, and the Netherlands as well, who are worried that a cap on prices would simply mean that they were supplied with less gas. And that gulf between those two sides thus far has proven insurmountable. Among those who want a cap, there isn't even agreement on what it should be. Some of the countries like Spain and Italy say that the proposed figure is simply too high and just will never be used. They've gone so far actually as to describe the proposals that are currently on the table as a joke.
Rob, how are Europeans now coping even as winter arrives?
Well, it is tough. Energy bills are up across the bloc, and the high energy prices are also forcing up inflation more broadly. So everything is getting more expensive, including food. Governments are having to take extraordinary measures to protect their citizens from the worst effects of the gas prices. Italy's government says it's spending $5 billion a month to support businesses and families. Meanwhile, here in Germany, people are making a conscious effort to reduce their energy usage, some voluntary, others through mandate. For example, public organisations have been ordered to reduce their energy usage by 20%. Many workplaces are choosing not to heat their buildings as well, at least not to the level that they normally would at winter, and it has just arrived, the winter here. It's been a very cold week. We've just had the coldest week of the year so far, in fact, and I was in one office where they were handing out blankets so that people could keep warm at their desks. So the energy crisis is very visible here, and people are consciously trying to do their bit.
Really grim circumstances. I can't imagine being wrapped in a blanket in the office. Rob, there'd been concern that Germany would not have enough energy to get it through this winter. Is that still the case?
Well, much of that concern was put to bed this week when Chancellor Olaf Scholz declared that Germany's gas reserves were full and that energy security for the winter had been achieved. And that is an achievement, however you look at it, really, because Germany has managed to end its reliance on Russian gas in just a matter of months, which it did need to do. Over those months, it's been negotiating all over the world to get alternative supplies of gas. German industry has also dramatically reduced its usage of gas, and Germany has also very quickly built its first terminal to receive shipments of liquefied natural gas. That's a big achievement for a notoriously bureaucratic country that has managed to achieve that in months rather than what you have to assume would have taken years in normal circumstances. There had been concerns that prolonged blackouts might be on the cards this winter, but the German network regulator says that that is now highly unlikely. But the question now is, what happens next year? Germany was able to fill up its gas reserves because there were at least some flows coming from Russia for much of this year. But they have to work on the assumption now that that won't be the case next year. So we'll have to find other ways to fill up those reserves.
Thank you, Rob, for bringing us up to speed on this.